This is a production of the World History since the 15th Century class at LCH 2021. Hi everyone, this is Jared,
and Ian.
and today we'll be covering the Russian Empire during colonial times. This is not a place with background we share, but we are hoping to use our research skills to share this lesser known history and an effort to foster community and understanding. As we are covering a colonial experience, we would like to give a content warning to our listeners. We will be talking about racism, abuse, slavery, and discrimination. We are not the voice of the Russian people. We are basing our information on archaeological and written historic evidence. Russian oral traditions may differ, but we are not the authority on oral traditions, but fully respect the narrative and encourage you, the listener, to find out more. Please forgive us if our pronunciations are not correct, despite our efforts to learn proper pronunciations to honor this culture. Our rough timeline starts around 1613. There's a lot to cover, so we'll get right into it.
In 1613, the Romanov family were the new rulers of the empire. Their rule started after a 15-year period of political upheaval and famine following the fall of the Rurik dynasty. Mikhail Romanov was the first of the long line of Romanov rulers, and he named himself Michael I, and he was the first Romanov Khazar. A Khazar is the Russian word for emperor who reigned before 1917, and 1917 was the Russian Revolution. And under his rule, he stabilized uprisings in Russia itself, and he made peace with Sweden in 1618, and then later fought Sweden and Ukraine for the Baltic region in the mid-17th century.
If we jump ahead a few decades, specifically to 1689, we can see Peter the Great as the ruler of the Russian Empire. He was a grandson of Michael I, and when he came into power, he inherited an underdeveloped country compared to other European nations. This is mostly due to the fact that Russia rejected westernization. However, Peter did not get the nickname Peter the Great for nothing. Despite being a new leader in an old-timey country, he did great things. He got rid of the old government and created a Senate. This Senate made amazing changes to Russia's foreign policy. He modernized the military and brought up to standards that matched or rivaled European militaries. He also focused on developments in science and education. He developed industry and commerce, created a more refined middle class, and later modernized the Russian alphabet. During his rule, Russia was involved in multiple wars against countries like the Ottoman Empire. Peter actually only had a single year without a war. Most of these conflicts helped with territorial gains, and one of these last wars during his reign had the Ottoman Empire join the Northern War against him. Peter tried to liberate the Balkans from Ottoman rule, but he and his army was defeated and ended with an important fortress being taken by the Ottomans. During his reign, Peter visited England, and while he was there, the nobles revolted. He came back and crushed the rebels, and killed some of them personally, and later made them servants of state for life. Jobs as servants of state could include work in the military or as civil administration jobs. I'm going to read a piece of a primary source that I found for Peter the Great. It is from Bishop Burnet of England, speaking of Peter the Great's visit to England in 1698. And I quote, "He is mechanically turned and seemed designed by nature rather than to be a ship carpenter than a great prince. This was his chief study and exercise while he stayed here. He wrought much with his own hands, and made all about him work at the models of his ships. He told me he designed a great fleet as Azov, and with it to attack the Turkish Empire, also known as the Ottoman Empire. But he did not seem capable of conducting so great a design. It was conduct in his wars since this has been discovered a greater genius in him than appeared during his time." At this point in time, Russia was quite powerful, and they proved this with their conflicts with the Ottomans and British. During Peter the Great's time, Russia as a country was improved a lot in terms of military might and social aspects of society and governments.
And if you jump another couple decades into the future, Catherine the Great, or Catherine II, would be the leader of Russia. She was not truly Romanov, but married him. Her real name was Sophie Frederick August of Anhalt-Bernburg. She was born on April 21st, 1729, in Stettin, Prussia. She was born into a very rich and powerful family. She was married to Peter the Great's grandson, Peter III. Peter III did many great things, but he was outshined at the time from his wife, Catherine. Peter III, for example, dropped alliances with Austria and France so that he could ally with Prussia, and shortly after that, Catherine the Great did a bloodless coup on her husband on June 28, 1762. You may be wondering, why did she do a coup on her husband? Catherine did it because she wanted the power, and she actually didn't love Peter III. Catherine had 3 other lovers during her marriage with Peter III. She pulled off this coup through her supporters, and her supporters were the enlightened thinkers because she accepted their thoughts and ideas, and she also had support of the regiment that lived in St. Petersburg, the capital. And she then named herself the Empress of Russia after taking Peter's spot. And Catherine II did not kill her husband, but one of her supporters did 8 days after the coup happened. Many people believe that she ordered it, and many people don't think she ordered it at all. Catherine the Great was respected by many, but not everybody trusted her as a leader, until she won a major battle against the Ottomans. She won a naval battle at Kazmi in 1770. This win gave many people faith in their leader who took over her own husband. But there was a group of people who didn't like the fact that Sophia Frederick August was the Empress of Russia. They were called the Cossacks, a military-based group of nomads originated from the Slavic countries like Poland and Russia. The leader of the Cossacks was Yemelyan Pugachev, and he called himself Peter III, Catherine the Great's deceased husband. This started a small revolt and grew to an okay size because Catherine had her troops fighting the Ottomans at this time in Turkey. Her troops won and then absolutely crushed the revolt that started, and the guy who called himself Peter III was captured and decapitated for what he did. And I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but it's not. It's a true story. And one very notable thing about Catherine the Great is that she changed the laws on serfdom, but not for the best. She changed what it means to be a serf and the taxation rules on serfs. Serfdom, for people who don't know, is a farmer that lives and works on the land of a wealthy homeowner, and the serfs are pretty much slaves, but they get paid to buy their own food and get free living. But Catherine changed the taxes on serfs that the landlords had to pay for the number of souls on their land. And here's the primary source that says it. And it also says that serfs need to be 100% obedient or they will be heavily punished. So this is the Decree of Serfs from 1767, made by Catherine the Great, and here's a little excerpt from it. That the landlords, serfs, and peasants owe their landlords proper submission and absolute obedience in all matters, according to the laws that have been enacted. So that's the different roles and rules on serfs, but here are the punishments: that serfs and peasants to disobey their landlords shall be arrested and taken to the nearest government office, there to be punished forthwith as disturbers of the public tranquility according to the law and without leniency. To me, that sounds pretty rough.
In October of 1853, the Crimean War kicked off. It was mostly fought in Crimea, which is directly south of Ukraine and west of Russia. It is a large island in the Black Sea. During the war there, Russia fought against the Ottoman Empire, France, and Britain. The war was directly caused by Russian demands to provide protection over the Orthodox Catholics under Ottoman rule. There were also disputes between Russia and France over Orthodox Catholic and Roman Catholic churches in the holy places of Palestine. The Ottomans took a firm stand against this threat in July of 1853, as Russians were occupying what is now Romania and later attacked in October of the same year. British and French naval fleets later entered the Black Sea to protect Ottoman transports. They both declared war on Russia after Russian fleets destroyed a group of Ottomans on the Ottoman Empire's shore. After a string of defeats and losses of important forts in the years following, Russia accepted early peace terms in 1856 after Austria entered the war. The Treaty of Paris was signed on March 30th, 1856, and it ended the war. Russia was forced to give up territory in the agreement, and all conflict in the Black Sea was ended, and any ships could travel through it freely. Alexander II succeeded Nicholas I in 1855, right before the end of the war. The Treaty of Paris would make Alexander thirsty for revenge and to compete with other European countries. Overall, the Crimean War left Russia crippled and in a bad place.
Alexander was born April 29, 1818, and was later assassinated on March 13, 1881. He reigned for a total of about 36 years, and Alexander did many great things for the Russian people. He changed many laws, rules, and regulations to better the people, and he did take over the rule of Russia at the end of the Crimean War. He took rule of Russia in 1855 at the height of the Crimean War. After the crippling defeat of the Crimean War, Alexander started to reform the whole country. Previously in Russia, there were close to no railroads, only one from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and it was about 1,000 kilometers long, not that long at all. But by the end of Alexander II's rule, he increased the amount of railroads by around 2,000%, which was about 22,000 kilometers of railroad after his 36-year reign. And he changed how the local government worked as well. He gave them more respect and established zemstvos, a voluntary local meeting, to give people more say in the politics and what's going on. This government change happened because Alexander II abolished serfdom altogether, and now there were more people who wanted to be heard, and this is how Alexander solved that problem of people not being heard. And serfs are now free to buy land. But there were some cons to serfs being free. At the time, most of Russia's economic benefits came from agriculture, and with serfs not being forced to work the land, profits decreased, and from that it shook all of Russian economy that was already crumbled from the debt of the war. Alexander II also strengthened his military. He put more forces at the borders to protect them, and the military made an education path that would train men to become troops to work in the military. This is all to make Russia strong again after the defeat of the Crimean War. And Alexander made a couple of friends in the Western world. In 1867, Alexander sold Alaska to the U.S. This benefited the Americans because at this time all they wanted was more land and more power. And the funds that Alexander got from selling Alaska, he gilded the dome of the Capitol building in St. Petersburg. Yes, man knew how to live in style. Real bougie. He then did his normal emperor's routine until he was assassinated in 1881. There's some more information after the 19th century, like World War I. and the Russian Revolution, but we don't get paid enough to talk about that. Well, we're not really getting paid at all to do this.
There are 4 different historical concepts that we would like to use to break down Russian history. We will start with cause and consequence. Many things happened during this time period, and there are many consequences that Russian leaders had to face. The cause of the Romanov dynasty starting was from a 15 period of unrest and famine, and the effects on Russia from the Romanov dynasty was astronomical. They expanded their territories, strengthened the military, and increased it in size, made some treaties and broke some treaties. We also see continuity and change in Russian history. Serfdom was in Russia for a long period of time. There were some changes to serfdom and its laws during Catherine the Great's reign, but it just made serfdom worse for the serfs and the landowners. But serfdom changed during Alexander II's time. Well, it was actually abolished. Serfdom was a solid platform for Russia's economy, and now is abolished. It started to crumble the economy, and eventually it helped lead to the revolution that we didn't cover in this podcast.
Well, thank you guys for listening to our podcast about Russia, and this is brought to you by the World History Since the 15th Century class of London Christian High in 2021.
This is the end of our podcast episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the information we covered. We would like to remind listeners that this podcast covers information that we found and not the whole story. Thank you again, and goodbye.